Hello and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Flame. This time, Ed and I talk all about roles. Hello everyone, yes, who's minding the grill? So how are we breaking up roles today? Ed, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while.
It's been a minute, but doing well. How about yourself, Mr. Toombs? You hanging in there?
Very good. England is extremely sunny today.
What?
We are, I know. Like, if I just do that, there's sun on my face.
What? Yeah,
That's
you need to get outside.
I know. If only. But there we go. Look, before we get started, Ed, I've got a question. Are there roles on a grill? Like, what is the actual protocol for a grill?
So here's the one rule that you need to know. If you go to someone's house and they are manning the grill, you are not allowed to touch the grill. Okay.
Okay.
Just don't even do it. Don't go over and look and pull things up. Don't poke things. That is like the unwritten rule of the backyard grill masters is you don't go mess with another man's grill unless you ask permission, kind of thing. So you got to respect that role. But that's a little different than in the service management industry.
It is a little bit. But do you have so for us over here, right? We'll have, like you said, you've got your grill master, who's the one that's looking after it, and usually the other host, i.e., my wife, would be doing all of the other more important things. I'm just trying to be manly and feel like good power on a grill. But she would be the one that's like making sure that, all the burgers are out the fridge and they're with me over there.
Drinks are available.
So you very much have those kind of very split roles, or certainly over here for me anyway. But awesome. So today, Ed, you and I are talking all about ITSM roles, the kind of roles that you would see on a desk. So what do you think are like the typical roles that we would see nowadays?
So I mean, nowadays it's getting a bit better where the roles are a little more distributed. Back in the day, you almost had by default, if you did not have a clearly defined process for your service desk management, it almost came with a Wild West kind of thing where, someone would just be the one person that you would go to for any sort of role. So the triage person, the L1, the L2, the L3 was all the same person kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
A jack of all trades kind of style.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which is, not very fun for that person, but we've come a bit of a ways now in that, I think we've gotten to a point where most organizations are specifically defining out, how their the roles are defined. So, we have the initial triage person, we have our L1s, our L2s, our L3s, our subject matter experts that we can pull in. So at least that's what I've seen. We've definitely gotten to a more effective role-based structure.
Oh, yeah, I think that's fair. I think when you compare, because at the end of the day, like a desk is anything that you think about, right? When you go to a hospital, you're still effectively interacting with the desk, right? So you've got someone who's triaging you, someone who's doing your initial investigation, someone who's then going to take you up and get bandaged before you then get released, right? It's very similar to a desk. You might not go through so many people, but you're still going through triage, investigation, like fix the problem and then resolve in essence, right? So it is very understandable why we've moved much more into that kind of tiered structure or very clear defined, you're doing this. But go on.
And I think we've also gotten to a point where we're allowing more automation to help with some of the roles. So, from a triage perspective, you can have someone, look at an issue that comes in, and then, normally, they might look at it and say, oh, the customer says this is an Sev 1, where it's like, okay, really, it's a Sev 2, and they can manage it from that perspective. Or conversely, where it can be a Sev 1 and then have workflow that automatically moves it to like an escalated status. So along with the roles, we're getting some help from the automation.
I think we're seeing a lot more of that kind of smarter split, which is if all of the information that we require is provided, we can somewhat estimate what we actually believe is going to be the problem here.
Yep.
So, for example, if it's a business critical system, right, you know that regardless, if the moment it might say down, unavailable, whatever it might be for a business critical system, the first thing you're going to do is like, well, let's get someone on that one right now. You do start to think about like smarter prioritization. You can check out the other episodes for those topics. But I think that's really true, actually. Really, really true. So actually, I just want to touch back on something you brought up just a second ago then, Ed, which was like that L1 to L2 and kind of the other kind of models that we're very familiar with. At what point do you think the right time is to kind of transition, or so are we only ever seeing L1s do triaging? Are we seeing them like at what point do you think each one kind of exit and enters that kind of life cycle?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of that depends on what your processes are and how you define that. And then obviously you want to make sure you document that very well as far as, hey, an L1 can take you to a certain point in the process. And if they cannot help or continue the resolution up to this point, now we need to transfer into the L2 and then again to an L3, which could be a subject matter expert or someone from the product team that we have to say, we've done everything up for L1, L2 per our process that we've documented and defined. At this point, we need to make sure that we can bring in our subject matter expert to help with this resolution kind of thing. So, I think there's definitely some demarcation lines that you can point out from a process perspective. And then you just, make sure that, from an organizational perspective, everyone agrees that, okay, this is where we're going to do the transition.
So you made it really clear then. So it's documented and it's process driven, right?
Yeah.
So I think something that I'm very used to from when I've worked on different desks over my career at the moment, which is your L1s. So they'll do all the triaging. They'll look at it. They'll do the initial intake. That's basic thing that they'll take care of. The second thing is that they are responsible for all of that first time resolution, and they base all of it off, like, in terms of where they can and cannot do things, off of their knowledge base articles.
Yep.
So is there a knowledge base article that is written for this subject? And are there clear run books that we can do to resolve it? So
exactly.
For example, how to provide someone access to a Confluence space, or how do you close an opportunity on Salesforce? Like anything that's can be documented in that, L1 would take care of. If there was no documentation, that's where the line was drawn, and it was given over to L2 to kind of look for, which is again like your specialized teams, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, how do you think that differs, or how do you think you may think about breaking up when you then refer from like an L1, L2 structure to kind of maybe something like follow the sun?
Yeah. So that's a good point, Dan. So a lot of these enterprise organizations have a follow the sun support plan. So you may have a support team in India, which will transition to a support team in California or Brazil, which may transition to a support team in Europe. So you're truly chasing the sun, and you're passing your issues off between those different support teams. So you need to have clearly defined a process to be able to hand off those incidents if they have not been resolved yet. So if you're going from India to California, there needs to be a clear transition, like your hospital analogy. When there's a shift change in the hospital, the current nurses will do a transition to the new nurses, and they will do, they will tell you, here's my patients, here's what the current status is, here's their schedule. Same thing with service management. We're handing over those services to a different team. So it's like we need to make sure they have all the pertinent information to be able to keep going with supporting that incident.
Yeah. So I've seen two ways of doing this, which I thought both of them made sense for the particular environment they were in. So the first one is what they class as a cold handover, right? Yeah. Which is probably what we're more used to in terms of that kind of follow the sun support. Dispersed team across the world. As one team was doing that shift handover, their last 15 to 20 minutes was not working on any tickets at all. So there was a 15 to 20 minute like overlap.
Yep.
And their last 15 minutes was to document every ticket they had gone on with a comment based on whatever actions there were, so that there was at least a handover note in between. So even if the handover note was no change, because whatever reason, there was at least a note that something had been looked at or considered. The better one was in a call center. Well, they had their own complete operation area, but they were also part of a call center. And they actually did what they class as warm handover. 15 minutes, everybody in the room. Here's everything that's gone on today. You might see higher call volumes because of this. You might see a lower call volume because of X. Be aware that this system is going down loads. Here's the typical response. Like, they had everything well defined because they class as a warm 15 minutes. And I thought that was quite a nice way of doing it, which is more probably, like you say, along that hospital line of like, let's get both nurses in a room. Let's discuss what's going on with each person, right?
I like that. I like the warm handover, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. So Dan, so we've been talking about, the roles here. What about, what have you seen in your experience about bringing new members on for their roles, and or how have you seen the addressing the, hey, it's not my issue anymore kind of syndrome occur?
So firstly, I think we see it way too often. Annoyingly, I think it's such a shame when people are like, hey, it's not my job anymore, but also I somewhat understand. It's quite an interesting balance. I think it's really important. The first thing you want to do is, with any company and actually any role, it doesn't have to be service related at all, but you need to be able to provide proper onboarding material for your staff. Okay, which is, here's in our world, maybe it's a conference space. Here's all of our processes. Here's when, who's the important account manager for all of our top 100 customers? Who is responsible for this service or X service or Y service? Where can you find that information? Maybe you've got that maybe stored in Compass for like a service directory. Maybe you've got track of that just on a Confluence page, but ultimately you need to be able to give them a known place to go and search from the start. Now, the second thing, obviously, you would expect is like to look at call handling and how they maybe look at interacting and sentiment and all those kind of things. And obviously, we're starting to get more AI, so maybe they can help with AI from like a sentiment change that you've seen on Jira. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a good starting point, which is, how good is your documentation? How good is your onboarding material? And when you do transition, because I've seen even in like a level 1, you've kind of got more subject matter experts, maybe people that have done these particular roles, answered how to get like a conveyor belt working a bit more than maybe the next person, is you have to look at how you are sharing that knowledge again. So, we've spoken many times about knowledge-based articles and documenting things and stuff. I personally don't see how, we need to shed that knowledge as much as possible, but I don't think you can ever say that it's not your job anymore to provide the service to your customers.
Yeah. And I think some of that's like a cultural thing too. You need to make sure you build that into your culture. It's like, hey, this is not how we operate, Yeah,
absolutely. I think what you might end up doing is like, hey, Ed, I'll help you this time, but just FYI, we take a look at this process and you'll be able to figure out what you should be doing. But you shouldn't ever be turning around and saying, it's not my job.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I'm out. Yeah,
exactly. Right. What about you?
Yeah. No, you're spot on with that. It's the, being empathetic to the situation, but also, making sure that, you're not being abused kind of thing, so it's like, hey, again, here's how I would do it. Here's how I would approach it. And here's, what you might think about next time kind of thing. So.
Yeah. I mean, we've both worked on desks where you end up kind of just because you're known, people circumvent process just to go and speak to you and because they're like, oh, well, Ed will help. I know Ed knows. And you do have to admit, like, this is why, like, you've got processes and things in place to kind of protect those assets, but you do have to, I certainly still want to make sure that is done, because at the end of the day, it's the service that you're providing to your customers. If you provide bad service, then it doesn't look great on you.
Yep. Exactly.
So I think this is an interesting thing, Ed, and it's going to relate back to triaging very specifically. Well, maybe not just triaging, because I think it does come into fact. But how do you think workload maybe want to be distributed? You know, there's round robin, there's first in, first out. Like, what do you think is the kind of thing that you would expect to see?
So a lot of what I've seen lately is, we're getting it's. We'll use Atlassian, JSM for an example, but it could be any service management application where you have the ability to define, the queues where specific service management incidents go into, and so a lot of times what you see is that these queues will be set up, and you will have automations that will help direct which queue that these will go into. So is this a Sev 1, it needs to go to this queue because we need to get on it ASAP. And we have notifications going, and we have different automations that say, hey, Dan, we have a Sev 1. We need to make sure it is a Sev 1 and or get people on it. Or there may be automations that say, hey, this is someone needs to reset their password again. So it goes over to this queue where we know we can help, not take, longer time, but we have a different level of support that can go, hey, we'll get this one going for those guys. So I've seen the queue management with automation has been a really big help as far as being able to distribute that load of, where the incidents go. And then also with the notifications and the agents being able to quickly identify, hey, I just got this incident, now I can go address it, kind of thing. What about you?
I've seen, so I think automation has to come in here, because I think there's what you'll often find that there's two things that I kind of want to touch on. But the first one might be if you're in a team and you don't have any sort of easy mechanics to share workload easily, like with like a round robin or whatever it might be, it can be a lot easier to hide in that kind of crowd.
Yes.
You'll often find that you're going to have some amazing resources which are really going to carry certain members of staff and whatever it might be. I think automation will help somewhat uncover that, because that's a challenge that I think people need to discover and help resolve with better onboarding or whatever. But it also takes the load off of your very crucial members of staff.
Yeah.
So by doing things like round robins, by doing specific expertise, like saying, okay, well, this is coming in, this is to do with Jira, great, let's put that over there. And like you say, we're going to put it in that queue, and then that people can respond. Or we're automatically, if it's to do with Jira and there's 5 people on that team, we're just going to automatically like select someone from that and give it to them based on what they're doing. Yeah. So I think that's that better way.
You're definitely right, because, back in the day, if you got if you just had, say, one queue or one place where the incidents were being sent to, you kind of got caught into the where people would go in and poach the easy ones. Yeah. Like, hey, I can reset this guy's password. I got it.
Yeah, I got it.
And then on the critical ones, we're kind of keep getting pushed down. So it's like, yeah, now if we get automation in, we can help distribute that and make it a little bit better.
I think it also helps highlight maybe where you're having more challenges with certain services. So if you've got 10 tickets come in and you are managing them all out of a specific queue, it might be hard to distinguish what's going on with them. Whereas if you've got specific queues for specific roles within the process, so here's a triage, here's everything that's waiting for an escalation, here's everything that's recently resolved. And then you may have sub queues or similar ones, which is here's all your hardware requests, here's all of your like critical application issues, because that way you can have very targeted conversations with specific people. So I've seen it be like, right, okay, Ed, today you're going to go do that. Tomorrow you can then take care of like hardware requests and things, because it gives you that focus to kind of look at that.
I'm going to tag on the end of that, because that's a kind of an important point that you're kind of making there, is that while we're tracking the roles, it's a really good idea to track your metrics for your support desk or your service desk with the roles. So you may have a dashboard that says, hey, here's all my service desk agents. Here's their workload. Oh, damn, Dan is like 80% all the time. Is there something happening that why he's so overloaded and everyone else is not? Or there's this trend of specific incident types that keep getting generated. So, whatever the request is, you can see the trends. So if you have these metrics and a dashboard that you can quickly look at and then be able to identify those and address them.
Yeah, I mean, your metrics are so incredibly important. And I think what that will then lead into is being able to spot possible early signs of kind of role creep or possible burnout. Because like you say, if you're 80% all the time, that's great, and you've got some bandwidth. But if the rest of your team are 20%,
right,
what's the disparity for? Is it because of lack of knowledge? Is it because just poor timing and you happen to be on when all these tickets came in? Like you'll be able, but without the metrics, without having those reports available, you don't necessarily know. But exactly. I do think it's incredibly important because burnout is what will kill a team. And I'm sure you've seen that.
I've seen it. I've actually gotten into a virtual back and forth fight with with a software engineer where I would assign him the ticket because it was part of him, and he would fire it back to me, and literally we were going back and forth, from that perspective, and it's like, okay, time out,
Yeah, because it doesn't. Obviously for the customers, it's annoying.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
It's not. It doesn't look good. It doesn't present well. But if you're overloaded, if there's no bandwidth because maybe you're only ever looking after hardware, or you don't doing it, like it's very difficult to kind of deal with, and you need to make sure that you're on top of it, because once it's here, the consequences are a lot harder than if you can start to somewhat like spot the signs a little bit.
Exactly. So use your metrics. To track those trends.
But what it would also do is allow you to switch resources, right? So if you can spot that 100% of your tickets over the last 2 months have been all about service A, it means that you can spot opportunities for retraining, right? Increase someone's ability to go and do something else.
And that comes into the whole problem management where, okay, well, something keeps happening, so let's figure out what the symptom is and address it. And again, you get those from your metrics, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Something I think is, and we thought about this a little bit earlier, in terms of like how you end up kind of being cherry picked by individuals. But do you think, or how would you spot and deal with possible like role creep of people, or you ending up having to do more because of something else?
Yeah, so that one's kind of a delicate one where you kind of need to learn how to be empathetic, but know how to push back correctly. If you become someone's security blanket, which is extremely flattering, like, okay, we know that we can go to you and hopefully get the answer every time, but there's other team members that are just as qualified and as good. So sometimes you got to have that balance of saying, okay, I know that you like coming here, but let's try this method. Let's try to go. Let's bring Dan into this call as well. So, Dan understands it, but you can also see that Dan is very capable of addressing these situations as well. So you just want to make sure you don't want to, I guess, enable being the security blanket as much as possible, if that makes sense.
It's very difficult because, again, this comes back to the whole "that's not my job," right? You want to help, you want to be able to do things, but there are processes in order to kind of make sure that you've gone through all the right steps to get there at the right time, right? And I think that's incredibly important. But also, as you mentioned, your metrics will help you define and spot those trends, right? If Ed is always the one that ends up being assigned straight from triage, but Ed's an L3 product engineer, why is it skipping L1 and L2? Like what's going wrong? Because you can spot that in your data. So I think that's important.
Yeah. So it's like anything we've discussed and we'll continue discussing is when you come up with your processes, in this case roles, it just takes, make sure you think through at all levels. Okay, here's our process. Here's our queue layout. Here's how we're going to address. Here's how we're going to do some automations to spread the load. We're going to make sure we look at our metrics. We're going to have everything documented, and hopefully, get all that thought process through, and then make it as
start with the Confluence page.
Yeah, seriously,
it is right. You just start.
Yeah.
Have those 5 headers. How do I tackle changing from L1 to L2, or how do I do handovers? And the moment you've gone through all of that, at least it's documented, isn't it? So, okay, well, thank you so much, Ed. As always, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. I wish we could do this more, but I'm sure well, we've got plenty of more coming up. I know that, but thank you very much all for joining us for another episode of Beyond the Flame. Thank you and goodbye.